They are perhaps Ukraine's most well-known unit on social media, where their videos rack up millions abused. The K2 Battalion of the 54th Recognized Brigade is an elite group of fighters who are veterans of years of fighting against the Russians. And they recently won recognition across the world for a terrifying video of their tanks destroying a Russian trench at point-blank range and then running over the survivors. Now they've released more footage explaining what really happened in the battle and how running out of ammunition forced them to take drastic action. This is the real story of one company holding the front line against Putin in the fight for Ukraine. For more on the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine, make sure you like this video and subscribe. With their headquarters in the city of Bamut, the 54th Brigade is used to being on the front line of the war against Russia in the Donbass. The K2 Battalion takes its name from their commander, Kilo Krovy, who edits footage of their battles after the fighting is finished. He says he doesn't seek recognition but wants the Ukrainian people to know that the military is fighting hard to protect his men, consider themselves an elite, and have been fighting Russian separatists in the Donbass years before Putin launched his most recent invasion. Almost all of the soldiers have won medals in previous fighting that has seen them destroy dozens of Russian armored vehicles and tanks. But one battle in March was more brutal than anything they had experienced before. The fight that made them famous was known as the Battle of the T-shape, after a series of trenches that was the focus of the fighting. It took place near the city of Sisk, around 20 miles north of Baku. During months of fighting against Wagner mercenaries, 8 members of the K2 Battalion occupied the trenches when 14 Russian fighters attacked them head-on before being pinned down in an open field. Ukrainian artillery then opened up, zeroing in on the Kremlin troops and taking them out. But unbeknownst to the defenders, 4 of Moscow's troops managed to flank the trench, running right up to the side of it and hurling grenades at those hiding inside in an extremely tense exchange. The Ukrainians somehow survived and managed to shoot one of the Russian soldiers dead before artillery took care of another 2 tanks then arrived, storming across the battlefield and attacking the Russians head-on, dozens of whom were cut down by machine gun fire as they tried to flee. Despite these heroics, the Russians did eventually manage to capture the 2 trenches, forcing the 54th Brigade to launch a counterattack. The assault involved 2 tanks and a BMP armored vehicle carrying around a dozen troops who were forced to attack through an open field to avoid mines that had been laid by the Russians. Once through the minefield safely, the tanks split up and attacked different trenches, opening fire with their main cannons on Putin's helpless troops. One of the tanks was forced to drive to within just a few feet of the Russian soldiers to get a good shot at them, with 2 rockets fired back which only just missed the vehicle, firing from virtually point-blank range. The tank scored several direct hits on the trench and managed to take out several Russian troops, but then it ran out of ammunition that forced the tank commander to resort to the only weapon left at his disposal, driving back and forth over the trench until it collapsed on top of the remaining defenders, burying some of them alive. Verde, commander of the 54th Brigade's 2nd Battalion known as K2, was inside the tank which led the attack and spoke about the assault afterwards of money. "And then we send us out. You done this." His tank only holds 22 shots, which were not enough to take all of the Russians out. Commander Veres said his plan was to fire all of the shells, but one then hold the last round in reserve as his troops moved in and cleared out the trench. Tense radio message between the tank and those watching the attack from an overhead drone revealed the moment he was told he was almost out of ammo, but there were still too many Russians left alive for the Ukrainian troops to attack on foot without being wiped out. So Commander Veres moved in as close as he could before firing the last shot. This failed to kill all the Russian defenders, leaving the tank crew with only one choice. Veres revealed how, when the tank driver had come to his unit for training, one of the first things he asked was whether he was allowed to run over Russian troops if he ever ran out of ammunition, had told the man he could. And so in the moment of battle, the commander decided to put that theory to the test. The tank was filmed rolling over the trench, repeatedly collapsing it on top of the remaining men inside. When Ukraine's troops did eventually moved in, they found nobody left alive, save for one man who they found under the rubble 22 hours after taking the position. He was eventually dug out and is now a Ukrainian prisoner of war. Commander Veres revealed the successful attack drove Russians back around 1.5 kilometers from the Ukrainian front line. In the grand scheme of things, that isn't much. But he revealed that if Putin's men had been able to hold the position, then it would have allowed them to threaten other nearby Ukrainian trenches. And it is important to stop Russian forces from Ava in this area. Because if they manage to break Ukraine's defensive line, then they will be able to head straight for the nearby cities of Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. Those two cities are the last major obstacles that Putin claimed the whole of the Donbass as his own, which he now says is the main purpose of his special military operation. This battle was just one of dozens being fought up and down a 600-mile front line in eastern Ukraine where Putin's troops have been trying and failing to advance over winter. War-weary units like the 54th have been holding that line for months. Now, limiting the Russian advance to just a few 100 m. While Kiev's commanders prepare for the counterattack, that operation could now be just weeks away, at which point it will be the Ukrainians trying to break through Russia's arcs. We can only hope they will have more success than these unlucky Varga mercies had at the hands of the ruthless men of the 54th.